From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
I'm here to introduce Sam McBratney, who has come all the way from Northern Ireland to be here. Mr. McBratney began... Yes. Mr. McBratney began writing children's books when he was in his 30s, working as a school teacher and making up stories for his own children. Many of his books were well loved, but the 57th was the charm. Guess How Much I Love You, illustrated by Anita Jerem. It has sold more than 15 million copies and is available in 37 languages. His latest book is a pop-up version of it. I won't try to name all of Mr. McBratney's other book titles, but a few include The Dark at the Top of the Stairs, Just One, and Just You and Me. Mr. McBratney has also written radio plays for adults and a prize-winning collection of short stories. He is married, and his wife came with him to the festival with 3 grown children. Please help me welcome, from across the Atlantic, Sam McBratney.
Well, thank you, Abby, for that glowing introduction. If I get too big for my boots, I just have to remember a visit to Dayton, Ohio in 1995, my last visit to America. I was doing an event in a bookshop in Dayton. The week before I did my event, Charlton Heston was there signing copies for his autobiography. The week after my event, Colin Powell was there, or was due to be there, to sign copies of his memoirs. And in between, you have Sam who? From where, you know? Anyway, it's Sam who that you have in front of you now, 3,000 miles from Belfast to Washington, and it's a privilege for me to be here. My first thought was that I would simply do a kind of question. When Candlewick said to me, I don't know when it was, way back in May, Sam, you've been invited to speak at the National Book Festival, and I blithely said yes, without a blind notion of what it was all about, you know. I thought I would do a sort of question and answer session. But apart from the fact that the organizers of the festival really want you to give a personal talk about your life as a writer, as someone who brings the product of his imagination to the marketplace, you know, I just realized a question and answer session wouldn't be on the cards because I remembered some of those from long ago. One time after a signing, a lady stood up in the audience with shining eyes and said, Mr. McBratney, my surname is McBratney too. Do you think we're related? And the next question came from a 9-year-old boy who pointed his finger and said, how do you get that thing on the back cover? So I'm juggling the book about. I thought he meant the dust jacket, but no. Point. And my finger came to rest on the barcode. Yeah, that. I said, I don't know about the barcode, you know. And you should have seen the look on the face. He doesn't know about the barcode. He doesn't know who he's related to. Aren't these writers supposed to know things? So, actually, I'm going to talk to you today about something that I know about. It's a subject I'm very familiar with, and it's called dead ducks. And it will soon become clear to you how I'm using the term dead ducks. But first, let me read you a story for the young at heart. I hope that this story will give you some idea of how I approach the task of writing for very young children. And I know that that's something that a lot of people in this audience are very interested in. You know, whether sometimes they're having a go at writing themselves or they're just interested in the techniques. What I tend to do is to look for moments of significant interaction between a big one and a wee one, to describe those moments of interaction truthfully and to render them with a light touch. And this story is one of my favorites, and it's called You're All My Favorites. And all you have to do is pretend that you're very, very young again. You're All My Favorites, written by Sam McBratney, illustrated by Anita Duran. Once upon a time, there was a mother bear, a father bear, and 3 baby bears. A first baby bear, a second baby bear, and a third baby bear. Whoever took them in at night always said the same thing to them: you are the most wonderful baby bears in the whole wide world. One night, after their mummy bear had tucked them in, and after she had said, you are the most wonderful baby bears in the whole wide world, the baby bears began to wonder. But how do you know? They asked their mummy bear. How do you know we're the best, the most wonderful baby bears in the whole wide world? Because your daddy told me, said their mummy bear. When your daddy saw you on the night that you were born, he said, and I remember it very well, he said, those are the nicest baby bears I have ever seen. They are the nicest baby bears anyone has ever seen. That was a good answer. The 3 baby bears snuggled down as content as could be. But one day, the first baby bear began to think. He wondered if the other 2 bears were better than he was. They had patches after all, and he did not. Maybe his mummy really, really liked patches. And the second baby bear began to wonder, maybe Daddy loves the other 2 more than me, she thought. They were boy bears after all, and she was not. And the third baby bear began to worry. I'm only the littlest, he thought. Everybody's bigger than me. So that night, the 3 baby bears asked their daddy bear, but which one of us do you like most? Who is your favorite? We can't all be the best. Yes, you can, said their daddy bear. I know you can, because I heard your mummy say so. When she saw you, and Daddy Bear picked up the first baby bear to give him a cuddle, she said, that is the most perfect first little bear that anyone has ever seen. Even with no patches. Patches don't matter at all, replied his daddy as he tucked him in. And when your mummy saw you, Daddy Bear picked up the second baby bear. She said, that is the most perfect second little bear that anyone has ever seen. Even if I'm not a boy. Girl or boy, it makes no difference, said her daddy, and he hugged her tight. And when your mummy saw you, Daddy Bear lifted the last baby bear into his arms. She said, that is the most perfect third little bear that anyone has ever seen. Even if I'm the littlest, bigly or littly, we love you just the same. So there, 3 favorites. You're all my favorites. And the three and the best baby bears in the whole wide world went to sleep as happily as could be, because that was a good answer too. Remember? I try to describe moments of interaction between a big one and a wee one, usually parent and child. I try to render that interaction as truthfully as possible, and I try to deliver it with a light touch. Now for the dead ducks. What's he on about, I hear you thinking. Now, let me say at the outset that I hope to inspire you to dig out that manuscript you might have in a bottom drawer, or inspire you to think again about getting down that on paper, that idea which has been rattling inside your head for too long. Do it. Write it. I have been writing stories for children, adults too, for nearly 50 years, and it doesn't half show. There are about 70 or 80 of them now, and a few more back home if you count the ones that haven't been published yet. Let me show you some of them. Mark Time. This is the book that introduced me to what I call the sorrows of the rejection slip. Published in 1976, but it took me 4 years to get it published. It says on the front, a fast-moving story set in Northern Ireland, but that's only the blub writer. Actually, it's a love story about a little boy of 11 who realizes at the end of the year he's going to a different school than the little girl he quite fancies. Oh. And this must be one of the last 6 books on the planet. There's another one talking about planets, School Trip to the Stars. I taught for many years. I was standing, it must have been November, on a November afternoon, looking out of the window, and the class for a change was doing a bit of work behind me. And I saw an early star. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if I could take this lot behind me on a school trip up there? And I went home and I started the book that very night. The Chieftain's Daughter, a story set back in Ireland's Iron Age about the time of St. Patrick. I'm a historian by training. I studied at Trinity College Dublin. Some of you might have walked through that wonderful cobbled square on the way perhaps to see the Book of Kells. I visited Craiganoan, a kind of theme park where they had a Cranagan Arath, old Iron Age dwellings. Now I knew, ladies and gentlemen and children, I knew before I started that interest in early Christian Ireland is not rampant among the general public. But I wrote the book anyway, wrote it from here, and in the end, actually, I did find a publisher for it. So I was delighted about that. Now, I live beside Lough Neagh, the biggest stretch of fresh water in the United Kingdom of England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, or Wales. And I was at an event one time when a publisher said to me, Sam, why don't you write a book called The Lough Neagh Monster? And I thought to myself, yeah, Scotland has its Loch Ness Monster. Why shouldn't Lough Neagh have its monster? And so I wrote a story in which the two meet up. Nessie comes over from Scotland to meet Noblet, our monster, in Lough Neagh, and he's not a bit happy about it because he's a shy and introverted monster. But she's a brash hussy from Scotland, and, you know, they don't really get on, you know. One of my few early books that was published in the United States of America, The Ghosts of Hungry House Lane. Hungry House Lane is the name of a street, name of a lane beside us, and I've often wondered why Hungry House Lane. I think it might actually date from the famine. Spooky kind of place. And this is a light-hearted story about ghosts. I couldn't write a real story, you know, a horror story. I hate horror, the horror genre, because When I work at night, I work from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock. I just I couldn't face the idea of going up and trying to squeeze out of my imagination the most horrible things I could find. So on the whole, when I came to write a ghost story, it was the other way around. When the children hear about that there's a ghost in their house, they say, great, let's go find them, And the poor ghosts are saddled with the problem of how to get rid of the children. Claudius Bald Eagle. One of my favorites, And I could go on for, 70 titles. But most of these books have one thing in common. You can't get them anymore. Dead ducks, I call them. Here's what happens. The publisher rings you up. Oh, Sam. London, London publishers. Sam, sales of Claudius Bald Eagle haven't been going terribly well recently, and we've decided to remainder. Now, remainder means sell them off cheap. Would you like to buy a few copies at 1/5 of the published price? And I always say, yes. Not because I want to, because it just seems too awful to say no. Alas, poor Claudius, I knew him well. He's extinct. Now, when I say, I buy these copies at 1/5 of the published price, the shelves in my house are coming down with my own books, purchased at 1/5 of the published price. My house is a mausoleum for dead ducks. That's true. Looking back on all that, looking back at half a lifetime of trying to bring the products of my imagination to the marketplace, what amazes me that I can honestly say I never got depressed. I never let the head drop and say, what's the point of this? I just thought, get the next one written, Sam. I thought that's how it was. See what sort of an advance you can screw out of the publisher. Luckily, I had the day job, or my poor family would have starved. And if there are any writers in this audience, they'll be saying amen to that. And then one day, my editor at Walker Books in London said, why don't you write a picture book, Sam? I said, do I not need to know an illustrator, Caroline? That's how green I was. We're talking now about 1992, I'd been writing for years. Do I not need to know an illustrator, Caroline? No, she said. Well, I said, would I not need to work with an illustrator, match text up with words, that kind of thing? No, Sam. And I said, well, Caroline, are you saying to me you want me to send you in a page? Picture books aren't very long, Sam, said Caroline, we have illustrators who can render in exquisite detail any creature that your imagination can dream up. What we haven't got are people who can write a powerful story using hardly any words at all. Now, I thought that was a great spake, It's what I later came to believe. What she was saying, she was actually saying that it's difficult. She said, it's not easy, Sam. And what she was telling me, it's as difficult to write a picture book that stands out from the crowd as it is to write a fine novel. Anyway, I said to myself, right, Sam, you're an old pro. Let's see what you can do. So I went home and I took the challenge, and of course the result was, guess how much I love you. For the story, I went back to an episode in a story I'd written earlier, unpublished, in which there was the mother and the child played a similar sort of game. And I can tell you that it was a new experience over 6 months trying to write that story with hardly any words at all. Every word had to fight for its position on the page And it did take 6 months. I mean, Caroline was right, it was not easy. And anyway, the book was put up for an award in the autumn of its publication. And I have to tell you that this was no big deal. For a goodly number of my books have had awards, but still, as you have heard, they no longer quack. At the ceremony, my agent was talking to my wife while I was away, and my agent said to Marilyn, Marilyn said to Marilyn, "Is he disappointed that he didn't win?" And Marilyn said, "Well, now that he's actually here and the book hasn't won, he'll not be best pleased." And my agent said, "But he's a winner already. The book has sold 100,000 copies." "Well, he doesn't know," said my wife. So they went and got me, and they told me, thank you very much. They went and got me, and they took my reaction, 100,000 copies, Dead Ducks, remember? I was just stunned silence. And nobody tells me nothing, they said eventually, or some such thing. Now, I'll skip over a lot of what happened next and bring you up to date with the fact that sales of the Nut Brown Hares after 15 years, and where's Abby? You're a little bit out of date, Abby, with your information. Sales are 29 million copies in 50-something languages, and this is the kind of thing that can happen. You're so kind. Thank you very much. A fortnight ago, a philanthropic organization in Latin America got in touch with Walker Books in London and placed an order for 1 million copies. It's just, somebody turns up and out of the blue places an order for 1 million copies. Dead Ducks, remember? Now, sometimes, and this is inevitable, I ask myself, why is this book so popular? Because it's a story about two hares in a field, And I don't actually, I don't actually have an answer. But, what I can say is that four things came together in the creation of the work. Yes, first the words. In the beginning was the Word. And the words came first, and the words are simple, direct, and true. But then there's the drawings. There's a gangly awkwardness, a boniness, about hares, which Anita Jerram has captured so beautifully. I do sometimes get a wee bit annoyed when people say, "I like the story about the rabbit," because they're not rabbits, they're hares. And hares, if you ever see, a stuffed hare, which was what Anita drew from in the first instance, if you ever see a stuffed hare, they've got these bony shoulders and, big ugly feet and paws. And Anita has caught that wonderfully. And of course, she has also caught wonderfully also that wonderful intimacy between a big one and a wee one. So and thirdly, the design. Such thought has gone into the whole package. My two favorite aspects of design are the lettering on the cover, which for me has a quaint old-fashioned feel. This is where and then of course there's the half title page, where little nut brown hare and big nut brown hare are looking out at you. And it's as if they're saying, "We are going on a journey. Are you coming along?" Wonderful piece of design, that. And fourthly, of course, there's those who brought the book to the marketplace, but there's a fifth factor. And I have to tell you that, in my opinion, the booksellers of America made this book what it is today. And I don't just mean the initial orders from big players in the business. I include the independent bookshops who awarded the book the Abbey in 1995. So creed, colour, nationality, it doesn't matter. This is a book that travels. 3 years ago, the book was published in China with sales of 10,000 copies and projected sales for next year are over 1 million. That's in 3 years inside China. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, whatever else, guess how much I love you may be, a dead duck, it is not. Before I read you the story, I'd like to point out that you'll find my delivery different from an American delivery. Now, we know about the I say tomato, you say tomato thing, but it's also interesting how often there is a difference in stress of words. President Bush used to talk about this guy called dictator who lived in Baghdad, whereas we say dictator who lived in Baghdad. You say adults, we say adults. You win the Ryder Cup, we win the Ryder Cup. On this American/English theme, the oldest experience I had was with Terry from Minnesota, a very fine editor. A book of mine called In the Light of the Moon was to be published in the USA, and in one of the stories there occurred the word style. Style meaning, a man-made gap between one field and another, not style as in fashion. Now, the conversation happened at company headquarters in London. Terry said, "Sam, we don't have styles in America." I said, "Don't be silly, Terry. You have everything in America, except for styles, Sam." I said, "There was a crooked man who walked a crooked mile. He found a crooked sixpence beside a crooked style." Terry shook her head sadly. I said, "Leg over leg as the dog went to Dover. When it came to a stile, jump it went over." And Terry shook her head sadly and said, "There are no styles in America, Sam. It's not an American word." Is that true? I still don't know if there are styles in America. But I think I allowed the word gate or gap or some such feeble substitute. In the Light of the Moon no longer quacks. It's one of the dead ducks. And I have informed Terry from Minnesota with malicious satisfaction. It's because she wouldn't let me use the word style. Guess How Much I Love You. Written by Sam McBratney, illustrated by Anita Duran. Little nut brown hair, he was going to bed, held on tight to big nut brown hair's very long ears. He wanted to be sure that big nut brown hair was listening. "Guess how much I love you," he said. "Oh, I don't think I could guess that," said big nut brown hair. "This much," said little nut brown hair, stretching out his arms as wide as they could go. Big nut brown hair had even longer arms. "But I love you this much," he said. That is a lot," thought little nut brown hair. "I love you as high as I can reach," said little nut brown hair. "I love you as high as I can reach," said big nut brown hair. "That is quite high," thought little nut brown hair. "I wish I had arms like that." Then little nut brown hair had a good idea. He tumbled upside down and reached up the tree trunk with his feet. "I love you all the way up to my toes," he said. "And I love you all the way up to your toes," said big nut brown hair, swinging him up over his head. "I love you as high as I can hop," laughed little nut brown hair, bouncing up and down. "But I love you as high as I can hop," smiled big nut brown hair. And he hopped so high that his ears touched the branches above. That's good hopping, thought little Nut Brown Hare. I wish I could hop like that. I love you all the way down the lane as far as the river, cried little Nut Brown Hare. I love you across the river and over the hills, said Big Nut Brown Hare. That's very far, thought little Nut Brown Hare. He was almost too sleepy to think anymore. Then he looked beyond the thorn bushes, out into the big dark night. Nothing could be further than the sky. I love you right up to the moon, he said, and closed his eyes. Oh, that's far, said Big Nut Brown Hare. That is very, very far. Big Nut Brown Hare settled little Nut Brown Hare into his bed of leaves. He leaned over and kissed him good night. Then he lay down close by and whispered with a smile, I love you right up to the moon and back. Now, the best thing, I read that to a group like this in Baltimore yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yesterday, yeah. And I hardly know what day it is anymore. And a man in the audience came up afterwards to say that he had tears in his eyes because he read it exactly the way we read it, he said, his daughter and himself, which I thought was a lovely compliment, you know. The best thing about books like Guess and Favourites and books which are very popular is this. I know that somewhere in the world tonight, a mum or a dad is reaching for something that I've written, and that he or she will read it to the most precious thing they have in the world. That thought really does please me, and it makes all the dead ducks worthwhile. Now, before I develop any other themes about writing or anything else, I'd just like to pause and see whether or not anybody in the audience would like to know anything about my career as a writer, or about Guess How Much, or about any aspect of the whole thing. I mean, I'm no critic, believe me, but I do know a thing or two about getting words down on a blank page. So fire away.
Could I ask you, when did you decide it was okay to quit teaching your day job and just start writing? And also, are you going to do Guess How Much I Love You as an apps for the iPhone? I read to my granddaughter on the iPad, and I would love that. She loves that.
I decided to devote myself full-time to writing when the kids left home, and when it didn't matter whether I made a success of it or not. So when I got to 50, in 1993, I said, right, Marilyn, I'm stopping, and I'm going to devote myself full-time to being a writer. We might be a bit poor, but still, you know, and that's the answer to that one. Off they went, one to Imperial College in London, one to Queen's University in Belfast. He studied physics. One to Queen's University in Belfast to study computer science, and one to University in Belfast to study business studies. Not a historian or a writer among them. No. But what was the second part? Sorry.
I read to my granddaughter on my iPad. Will you be making an iPad version of Guess How Much I Love You?
Yeah. Can I ask you, Laura, you just shout out to me, is there one already? An iPad version? You can get an app in the UK. it's almost certain to get. It's almost certain to come. You know, they have it every other way. You know, so I. Oh, have you? Yeah. 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 Okay.
When your book was published, I was a children's buyer for an independent bookseller in Colorado Springs, so I appreciated your comments about it being independent sellers.
Thank you very much.
I met that rep, and when he pulled out that book, and I saw I was enchanted by the drawings. But it was the story, it was the powerful story that I just couldn't wait for him to turn the next page. And when I went to the owner of the bookstore, because this was an independent store, I said, you need to buy a huge stack of these books. This is going to be huge. And he said, yeah, well, I think it was Candlewick Press. They don't usually do, never heard of Sam McBratney, blah, blah, blah. He goes, get 2. So I ordered 15. And they were gone first week. And Joel called me in the office and he said, what's this? Because he watched the sales of every, and he goes, what's this book? And I said, you told me to order 2. And he said, well, get to the jobber and get more because it's going fast. So it was a book that once you picked it up and started reading it, you were gone. And I just wanted you to know how much I loved that book. Thank you.
Well, yes, I really do appreciate that. And if the book, in 1990, it came out in London first, and I think it was in Knightsbridge. I went into a shop in Knightsbridge. The shop was owned by an independent bookseller, and I said to her, "It's amazing to see how many copies of this book have been sold." She says, "Would you like to see how it's done?" I saw this happen. A customer walked in. Now, Knightsbridge, I admit, is a fairly wealthy part of London. You know, they're not short of the odd, shilling, And but a lady walked in and was looking for a book for a young child. The owner of the bookstore went over, said, "You might like this one." Opened the book, read it to the lady, up to the point where little nut brown hair looks up and says, "That's good hopping," and then said, "Shall I parcel it up?" The lady bought 5 copies. I saw that happen there and then. I was just absolutely astonished, So that echoes, what you're saying as well. That Dayton, Ohio. Well, they wheel in trolleys with the book, up to your chin. And, it's absolutely amazing. Now, what I was going to say was just about the whole technique of writing books for very young children as well. You'll notice that there are only 395 words in that picture book, and that's because, as I said before, I left so many words out. For example, that there's a spread in the book where little nut brown hare standing on a tree trunk, a sawn-off tree. Now, I didn't write little nut brown hare jumped up on the tree, which had been sawn or whatever, in order to speak to. The illustrator has done that. The illustrator has brought her telling of the story to the whole enterprise, and it's wonderful how Anita is able to move, from one page to the next without me having to use so many words. One of the things I'm so pleased about is that in the end, and this was not inevitable, but in the end, they decided not to have the hares wearing any clothes, because now it's just so natural. When you open that book, it's you could nearly see Miriam playing "Guess How Much I Love You" with little Moses on the banks of the Nile. There's nothing to date it. It's just timeless. And whoever decided to do that, that was another inspired idea. Anybody else?
With the conflict in Belfast, how has that given you some material to write to children?
Sorry?
With the past conflicts that have happened in Belfast, has that given you any material to write to children to explain what's going on?
What a good question that is. What happened in Belfast, what happened in Northern Ireland? you know, in the 70s, is I mean, my own children were nearly blown up, you know, by they were trying to blow up the guy next door, and even adults or adults find it difficult to get their mind around what was happening, you know. So writing for children and trying to mediate between the awfulness of it all and literature. I've stayed away from that. I haven't tackled that. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm not saying it shouldn't be attempted, but I just say it's not for me. I just leave that one to somebody else. Just on that, could I add something? I know there's not much time left, but a fast-moving story set in Northern Ireland. I wrote that book in 1969. Now, the Troubles didn't really break out until late 1969, if you remember, in that autumn, and then they got worse and worse. So, I believe that the reason why I found a publisher for that book, which is now a dead duck, as you've heard, is because people began to hear about Northern Ireland for the wrong reasons. You know. Thank you for that question. That's an interesting one, but I haven't gone that route. You know.
Can you show us some of the pictures from the book? I love the book you just read. Can you show us some of the pictures you were talking about with the hairs and the little? Can you show some of the pictures from the book?
Yeah. Take them down. Let that lady see the big book. It comes in all shapes and sizes. I mean, you can get it that big, or you can get it that big, and there's even one 4 foot tall, I'm told, you know. Anita Duram's husband worked in the museum, the Belfast Museum. One of the amazing things about this book is that when I sent in my page, remember, to Caroline, they could have got an illustrator from Britain, from America, from Europe. The one they chose lived 30 miles away from me in Belfast, in Temple Patrick. Anita still lives there. She's English, but her husband was working in the museum, and I think he brought home the stuffed hair, you know, for her to work from.
I just wanted to say, do you think that a universal truth that everybody could relate to that book? Is that why you think people bought it?
One of the fascinating things about children's literature is just you and me. That's a story. That's a story about geese. The dark at the top of the stairs. Nice. It's lovely when you smile. He's a kangaroo. I'll always be your friend. Fox. Once there was a hoodie. Well, I made a hoodie up. You know, there's no such thing as a hoodie. But when I go up to work at night, 8 to 11, I still work, you know, evening hours, as they say. I don't know whether I'm going to be a goose, a mouse. I've been a caterpillar, a kangaroo, a big bog frog. You know, it's a very, very strange way to make a living, you know. And I've often wondered why it is that animals are so, you know, are so popular with writers for young children. But I think, you know, my time is up. Thank you for being such a nice audience.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.